So you guys get out there and do that. And so the servants go out into the streets and they clean in the streets of the homeless. There are no more homeless on the streets. There's no one left in the gutter. They clean out the emergency room wards. They clean out the homes of the hospice. They clean out the homes of those unfortunate, the poor. They go to the worst ends of town. They bring them in buses. I know I'm being melodramatic. There are no buses, in case you didn't know that. This is the first century. But you can go with me with the story, please. And so they're bringing them in. And the servant comes to the master and says, we still have room. And you know why we still have room? Because Jesus told his disciples, in my Father's house are many mansions. In other words, in my Father's house is a lot of room. My dad doesn't run out of room. If he needs another room, we just put another room in the house. Dad's going to find room for who he needs to find room. And the servant says, we've done all we can do. We cleaned out the homeless. We cleaned out the ghetto. There's no one left in the hospitals. They're all down there eating and having a good time. And we still have room at the table. What do you want us to do now? And the master says, I want you to go out into the roads and the lanes. What the old King James says, I want you to go out into the highways and the hedges, or the highways and the byways. I always kind of liked highways and byways. There's the highway and then there's the byway. It's over here. Whatever road you go down, go find people and bring them in. And notice that the qualifications are all they have to do is actually be out there on the highway and the byway. He just put the net out wider. So now it's not just the poor and the blind and the lame and the crippled. Now it's anybody breathing. Anybody breathing that you can find that's moving, bring them in. If we're really honest here, we get confronted with something that gets a little uneasy for us. It got a little uneasy for the people at the dinner. It was uneasy enough when Jesus said, hey, look around. Where's all the poor people and the lame people and the blind people at this dinner party? That was uneasy enough. What really gets uneasy is when he goes, what if we were to clean out the world? There's no one left. We brought them all in. What's uneasy about that is that we know what those people are like. We know how they think. We know what they do when the lights are off. We know what they're like behind closed doors. We know how they talk. We know how they live. Are you sure that you want them at the party? I mean, if we go out into the highways and there's no poor left, there's no blind left, there's no lame left, and there's no cripple left. What's left? Maybe a bunch of God haters. Maybe a bunch of people who would rather not be at they'd rather firebomb the party than come to the party. Maybe that's all that's left out there. Maybe the only ones left really just truly don't want to be at parties. Those are the ones you want me to go get. And the story limps across the finish line for us because it can't be where Jesus wants us to land with the gospel, is to throw this kind of a party. But then, in classic Jesus fashion, he won't just be quiet. He won't just stop talking. He has to throw in that one more zinger, that one more thing that even though we're only limping across the line is going to make it even harder. And he says in 24, for I tell you, none of those who were invited will actually get to taste of it, which gives us the biggest curveball of all. So how do we get into the kingdom? I mean, it's not invitation only, because he just said it's not invitation only. It's not only not invitation only, the invited people don't even get to go. So what do we do with this? I mean, are we to assume that and so here's part of what we've done with it. We've made it a Jew-Gentile thing. We did that so we could kind of figure out where to land on this. What we did with this story is Israel had been invited to the party in covenant with God, and they rejected it. So God went out and got all the poor and the crippled and the lame and the blind, and then he went and got all of us. See, you notice how we love it if we get to be the third ring. If we get to be the third ring, then this is a good story. Because that means, apostate Israel missed out on the party. God's not going to invite them in the end anyway. The only way you're going to get in is to be like us. Because notice whenever we need it, it feels good to be that third ring. When we need it, it feels good to be the people in desperate need of grace. And so when we need that desperate need of grace, we pull in, we receive that grace. So I think you probably know that's not where I'm going to land on this, is to say that God's saying to national Israel, you're the one. No, that's not where I'm going to land at all. And here's why, because I think all that does at the end of the day is develop, in some ways, the grossest form, as if there's a good form, but maybe the grossest form of anti-Semitism. And what I mean by the grossest form is the kind that exists under the guise of Christianity. That's the grossest form of anything, by the way, is when you attach Christ to something that excludes people. It's the grossest form of excluding. It's to put Jesus on the front of it and go, that's what Christians, that's what we stand for. And you go, we really ought to reconsider that which slammed the door with Jesus on the front of it. So you work through that, okay? So let's don't land there, because we can do better. And I'll tell you why we can do better. Because Jesus isn't finished. You probably assume that as much, because your chapter keeps going and Jesus keeps talking. And so there are other things that Jesus keeps saying. And when we land at the end, we find that Jesus gives us an explanation that works because it scares us. Let me say that again, or maybe say it better. I know that sometimes we think, well, if Jesus says it, it's never going to bother us. Oh, contrary. If Jesus says it, it will often bother us, because it's the truth that is sharper than a two-edged sword that's coming out of his mouth, and that divides parts of our life. And so, before we land there, I just want to make sure that we are in the same boat, because we're all on the same water. We might as well, and we're in the same room, we might as well be in the same boat, all right? And being in that same boat, we're sitting at that dinner. We've just had a wonderful evening of conversation with Jesus. He's a rather delightful fellow. His disciples are nice guys. He tells funny stories. He's healed a few people. It's been spectacular. And then at the end of the party, he drops this little bomb on us that maybe our party wasn't as good as it could have been because we didn't bring enough of the trashiest kinds of people into it. Yeah, not real happy with this. Elbowed my neighbor, said he could have left that out. The night was going well until he said that. I could have done without that. But hey, in the end, we all actually get in the kingdom. Everybody that gets to go is blessed regardless of who they are. That's kind of my response to Jesus. That's us. In the end, we all get to go. In the end, whoever gets there, that's the ones that are blessed. And then, lo and behold, Jesus just won't leave it alone. And here comes this bizarre story about a master who invites us to the party. But we got too much stuff going on. And then he invites the poor, and that's not enough. So he invites the dregs, the true outsiders. I think by the time he gets to this part in the story, the room's dead quiet. I don't think there's anybody talking. I don't think there's anybody elbowing. I don't think there's anybody laughing. I think there's a little bit of disturbance. It's unease in the room. Especially when he drops that chestnut in that no one invited gets to come. And now they start to look at each other and go, then how do we get in? No one invited gets to come. So, let's start at the end. Who got invited? Those who got invited were living their lives, buying their homes, buying their properties, buying their oxen, going on their honeymoons. Is it a diatribe against wealth? Is it a diatribe against success? No. Everyone who was invited was living their lives. They had other things to do. They had stuff that made life worth living. They held on to it. They did well with it. Everybody invited was a success. Who gets invited next? The ones that never have anything because they can't do anything to get it. They're the bottom end of the meritocracy pyramid. They're getting crushed and stepped on all the time. Jesus says, let's start there. Bring in people that'll never get in by themselves. Now there's openings at the table. Oh, we still have room? Okay, let's go get people who didn't even know I was throwing a party. They don't even know what the other side lives like. Bring them in here and show out. Go get everybody and anybody that you can find and bring them in. Oh, and by the way, tell the world that the only way to get into this party is to get in without the original invitation card. And here's why the original invitation card doesn't work. Jesus, from this point on, gives the costs of discipleship. That famous, unless a man hate his mother and his father and his brother and his sister and follow me, he doesn't have my life in him. That's a hard pill to swallow.